Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy. As always on Tuesday, going to go through the top 100 players in the NFL list that the players have done. Today's episode will be covering players 40 through 31. I'll be giving my opinion on the players' selections and then giving my 10 picks that correspond with them. Starting to get to the nitty gritty of the list now. Be a bit more vocal in some of my disagreements. Starting to see some players, very high on the list that haven't even made my own. So let's hop right on in. And player number 40 on the players list, Atlanta Falcons linebacker, pass rusher, and reigning NFL sack leader, Vic Beasley. Now, he did not make my list. Last week I did my top 10 pass rushers. A couple of weeks ago, top 10 exterior pass rushers in the NFL at this point in time. He just about scraped into that list. For me, he's not got a well-balanced enough game at this point. Whilst he is a very effective pass rusher, I want guys that can play the run. Take, for example, a guy like, say, Chandler Jones had, I think, 10.5 sacks last year as opposed to 14.5. However, he was vastly superior against the run. So for that reason, I would rather have a guy that gets 4 less sacks but generates more overall pressure whilst also playing the run very effectively. Don't get me wrong, I think Beasley is a very promising young player. Of course, great pass rusher at this point in his career. But I just feel there are better players. Until you've got a more balanced game, you're not going to crack my list. At this point, he is just a speed rusher. For that reason, I think this is far too high, of course, but sack is one of the glory stats in the NFL that will get you a lot of attention. Good player, don't get me wrong, but not balanced enough, not good enough. I mean, not on some of those top guys' level, in my opinion. At this point, does not crack it. So disagree with the players on this one. For myself, player number 40, whilst he may be a bit one-dimensional. Well, I think that's how a lot of people would view him. I would disagree with it. I think this guy's a great player. Is Damontre Harrison. Played last year with the Giants. Had his best season as a pro. The premier nose tackle in the NFL right now. He's been very good for a few years. Last year they had him in the 4-3. Got to see him being used in a bit more of a dynamic way. Of course, 3-4 nose tackles tend to have the least glorious job in the NFL of just holding up the point above the centre. Harrison last year, I think he got to show that he's a much better pass rusher than he's ever been given credit for, all the while maintaining that stellar run-stuffing ability. The Giants' defence was incredibly solid last season. Harrison was one of the biggest parts of that. There was an exceptional secondary and a great front four, and he was a huge, huge element of that. I mean, they all played the run well along that line. Made things far easier for them linebackers, who, as we all know, are not a particularly talented group. I really enjoy watching him play. Of course, one of the hardest guys to move. Going to have to double him, and even then you're not going to get a huge amount of push. If you want to block him one-on-one, he's got the power to just get into the backfield, disrupt pass rush lanes, get pressure on the quarterback. May not necessarily get the sacks, but what a season he had. Absolutely deserves a very high spot on this list. Now, next up, the players came with another great defender, Bobby Wagner of the Seattle Seahawks, the middle linebacker. I think this is far too low. Wagner and Kuechly are, of course, the two premier linebackers or middle linebackers at this point in time in the NFL. I think Wagner's been absolutely stellar for the last 2 or 3 years. I've got him incredibly high up on my list. It's good to see him high on this list because he should be. He's a great player. Understands exactly how this defense works. Gets this team into the right play more often than not. They're still a very good unit. Last year, not their best season. There were some injuries, a bit of general disruption across that group, but Wagner's play absolutely stellar. Always plays at a high level, can He's a great tackler, diagnoses plays as well as anybody, and is an asset in coverage. This is absolutely what your modern NFL linebacker looks like. I think this is too low. This is just a fact. It's one of the positions that never gets too much glory in these lists. I think the only player that sort of used to get this high was Patrick Willis, and I think Navarro Bowman did a couple of times, or around the kind of range I think he should be in, and also Kuechly. But I think Wagner absolutely is on that level. I think some of the talent on that Seahawks defence sort of takes away from that. But I'll discuss him more in a future episode when I do reveal him on my list. But yeah, come on, players. You know he's better than that. Myself, player number 39's already been revealed on the players list, but one of the things I've argued, because this is a quarterback, and that quarterback is Andrew Luck. I've argued this for a lot of the QBs on my list and where they're positioned, while there have been players with greater team success, possibly better statistical numbers below guys like this. When you watch the film, you can see these guys carrying the team. I've said it till I'm blue in the face. The Colts have been awful the last few seasons, one of the most talent-deprived rosters in the NFL. Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton have pretty much been that offense. The fact they won 8 games is a testament to how good this guy is. He really can do it all when he's healthy. He's a far better scrambler than people still give him credit for. You still hear them talking about this fact during commentary of games. It's absolutely absurd. Of course, we know he's a great runner, or at least we should do. As very aggressive. I think that's partly down to knowing he's going to have to score a lot of points. His defence has been really bad. He's played behind some poor lines. He's suffered injuries as a result. But he's always going to be productive. Gives this team a chance to win. And I thought last year was a really good season from him after a couple of sort of a bit more ho-hum seasons. This guy's as talented as it gets. Don't be surprised to start seeing him start putting up ridiculous numbers if this team can be built correctly around him. He absolutely does live up to the pre-draft hype. He's a heck of a player and very much deserving of such a high spot on this list. Now, player number 38 on the players list. I can't argue too much with this one. I had him a little bit lower. But Fletcher Cox, as I say, a little bit high for me. I thought he absolutely had an incredible season once again. He's slowed down a bit. I thought he started the season looking like a potential defensive MVP candidate. Then the Eagles kind of just fell off as a whole. Had he maintained that level of play or something close to that throughout the season, I would agree with this ranking. I had him down at 54. He's still one of the most talented linemen in football. I think he's scheme diverse. I think he can play a bit of end. He's a good run player, an even better pass rusher. I think one of the best pass rushing interior linemen in football. And as I say, doesn't give up much in the run. Uses his hands really well. Can get that instant pressure off of that first step and quickness. An absolutely fantastic player. I'm glad to see the players giving some credit to a guy who maybe isn't quite as well known. But as I say, for me, a little bit high, but I won't give him too much grief. I think this is a pretty solid range for him. Myself, player number 38, I had LeSean McCoy of the Buffalo Bills. People have been sort of quietened on him, I think. Just being in Buffalo, maybe don't get as much attention there as he did in Philly. He's been absolutely stellar, though. If it wasn't for injuries, he'd be near the top of the league in scrimmage yards, rush yards, every single season. Now, the scheme there, I think, is absolutely perfect for him, and I do think that helps. They've got a good run-blocking line. Tyrod Taylor, also a threat to take off. We have seen when you've got effective scrambling quarterbacks, it does help the running back out. And Tyrod Taylor is exactly that. But this guy, is probably the closest thing to Barry Sanders-esque that you'll see. Probably the toughest guy still tackling the open field. Great asset in the receiving game. He really can do it all. Maybe not the best pass blocker. That's the one thing I think you give up by having him in your lineup. But he's such a weapon to have on the field. Really helps keep this Bills offense looking legitimate because they've had a mediocre passing game. Part of that being the receiving group, part of it being the enigma that is Tyrod Taylor. Still, for me, the hardest player to judge in the NFL at the position at this point in time. This offense, this team goes through LeSean McCoy. That's going to continue to be the case. Absolutely stellar player. One of the great elusive running backs of all time, in my opinion. So I've got him pretty high up. I think he deserves it. Coming in at number 37 on the players list, and I think this is a pretty good range for him. Got him a bit higher up, and that is the Denver Broncos, Aqib Talib. I think over the last 2 or 3 years, you could possibly argue he's been the premier number 1 corner in the league. I think his play is more consistent than like Patrick Peterson's is. I think he plays zone better than some of the man corners. He plays in terms of being able to play zone or man equally well. I think he does a better job than most. Great tackler. He's really become a very, very intelligent player. Gets a lot of interceptions. It's just hard to get completions on this guy, and he's an asset in the run game. Good to see him being recognised for that fact. It's a great group they've got there in Denver. Bit higher up on my list, but not an enormous amount. So can't throw too much shade on this one, but I'll discuss him a bit more in future. Myself, player number 37, Packers left tackle David Bakhtiari. He'd be higher up if I'd got to see more from him as a run blocker. I think he's arguably the best pass protecting left tackle in the league at this point in time, especially blocking for Aaron Rodgers. I've mentioned this before. That's a challenge for anyone because you never know how long you're going to have to hold your blocks for, how you may have to adjust to what you're doing, pick up guys as Aaron Rodgers runs around like headless chicken back there looking for a big play. But simply put, this guy just nullifies most rushes. Very difficult to get by him on the speed rush. Got great foot speed, getting out of that stance. A very long tackle, which is always essential in today's game. Once he's got his arms on guys, it's just, you have to beat him at the hand fighting, otherwise you're not getting round him. As I say, an exceptional pass protector, a really good player. I want to see a bit more from him in the run game. You could argue that about the entire Packers team. It's been last couple of seasons, it's been really the one major weakness on that offense. But this guy's an exceptional young player. The Packers have seen that. You can tell from the fact those guards have both gone in, TJ Lang and Josh Sitton, who are both very good players, that they see Bakhtiari as the best young player on that offensive line. They've given him the money when maybe he was a bit more of an unknown, but it looks at this point like they were absolutely right in doing so. I expect to see him as a mainstay on this list for years to come. An exceptional player. Coming in at number 36 on the players list. Here we go with the first truly egregious ranking of this list. This one. I was unhappy last week with some of the receivers, with Larry Fitzgerald and Jarvis Landry being as high as they were, and I love both of those players. This is a similar one where I really like this kid. Tyreek Hill, he was fantastic. He actually won me a couple of fantasy games. My team was awful last year, but he came in and really helped me out. Made my season slightly less embarrassing. One of the most fun guys to watch, of course, electric in the return game. Elite speed, possibly one of the fastest guy. Well, I say possibly, almost certainly one of the fastest guys in the league. Far more effective as a route runner than perhaps people expected him to be in his rookie season. Of course, drafted at the point he was, came in, played very well, added a real X factor to that Chiefs offense that they've not had in the receiving game. Who knows how long? But to say he's this high on the list, he's a better player than Bobby Wagner. Or Marshall Yonder. Oh my goodness, that's just absurd, frankly, and I'm very disappointed to see it. This is the worst one I've seen so far. He wouldn't have cracked my list. He didn't play in enough games, whilst he did have a big impact when he was in. Just, come on, guys, what are you doing? Marshall Yonder, Bobby Wagner, Aqib Talib, so many of these guys that I didn't even consider Tyreek Hill for my top 100. And I thought he was great, but this is the worst thus far. Myself, getting back to the world of the sane, number 36 in my list, Giants corner, Janoris Jenkins. I know he's been a bit of a, seen as a bit of a character risk. Turns out the Rams weren't willing to take that chance. They stuck with Trumaine Johnson, who's a fine corner, but I think really everyone knew that this kid was the superior option, and last year he absolutely demonstrated that. Really did play like he had a point to prove to the Rams for letting him go. Was one of the best man corners in the league last year. Exceptional in press, great ball skills. Guesses a little, but got it right a lot. Clearly, has developed some great study habits over his time in the league. He was a real X factor for this Giants team. That pass defense was tough last season. I think he was the primary reason for that. Truly has developed into an exceptional corner. I want to see him keep on playing on that level. For me, he was probably the best corner in the league over the second half of the season. So, yeah, exceptional player. As I say, for my money at this point, possibly the best press man corner in the football. And yeah, exceptional season. He's got a good group around him. I expect to see him, if he can keep his head straight, I expect to see him continue to dominate in New York. Coming at number 35 on the players list is a player that, for me, again, didn't crack my list, just simply didn't play enough last year. I know I put some injured players in, but they at least gave us something, and that is JJ Watt. Now, for my money, he's been the most dominant player in the NFL at any position over the last few years. Would almost certainly have found himself in the top 10 had he came back healthy and managed to stay it. I don't like when you get players this high up on the players list sort of based on their previous situation. I understand it because this guy is just an absolute monster. I mean, the stats he puts up, and then you look at the game tape, and if anything, the stats don't necessarily do justice to how disruptive this guy has been. I mean, it just absolutely fantastic. Can understand why he's on the list. Didn't crack mine. Didn't see enough of him. If he comes back and is the JJ that we've seen previous, absolutely deserves to be on the list and is one of the premier players in all of football. Myself, number 35, the other Broncos corner. Chris Harris Jr. Now, remember when Talib was mentioned, he was on the players list. I have not revealed Aqib Talib yet. I think Talib is the number one there. I think Chris Harris is an exceptional player who benefits from having him opposite because he gets to line up against some number twos and frankly just dominate them. I think Chris Harris could be a number one on 90% of teams in the league. Absolutely one of the best zone corners around. Can play man, no real holes in his game. He's certainly got great quickness, great ball skills. I mean, really just an exceptional all-round player. Plays a lot bigger than he looks. I think he's got the versatility that you can move him around, play him at any spot. I think Talib's an outside guy. I wouldn't want to put him in the slot. I would have no such qualms with Chris Harris. I think that aspect of him and Bradley Roby, I think their versatility with Talib being a true lockdown man guy is what makes this secondary and this corner group so good. You don't see this kind of talent often amongst the corner groups. Hard to keep them all together, but this guy's exceptional. Absolutely fantastic player and well deserving of such a high spot on this list. Both of that tandem come in very high because they're great. Coming in at number 34 on the players list, moving on, and staying out west is Cam Chancellor. Came in at 53 for me. Just missed out on too many games last season to get too much higher for me. I think this is again, a bit of a reasonable one, probably about this high because of the name factor. This team does look significantly worse without him. Of course, possibly the hardest hitting safety in football is one of those cases of it's a linebacker that happens to be playing the safety position, but he can play the safety position at a very high level as well. A lot of these guys, these thumper type guys, do not necessarily have the range or ball skills of Cam Chancellor. That to me is what sets him apart, as well as leadership and stuff. On top of that, great player. It's a little high for me just considering he missed some games, but I think players have done okay there. If he'd stayed healthy, this probably would have been about the range I would have had him in. But we'll stick in Seattle for player number 34 on my list, and that is Russell Wilson. Much like the previous quarterback I mentioned, man, he had some struggles last year, most of them not his fault. He just took a beating. It began in week 1 where they got very lucky to escape the game against Miami with a win. He got absolutely beat up in that game. I remember the Tampa game in particular, where he took something like 5 or 6 sacks in the first half, and the Buccaneers pass rush is hardly the scariest in the league. Had no run game to speak of all year. The receiving talent's fine around him. I really rate Doug Baldwin. He made an appearance on my list. But man, to have the success that he's had this last couple of seasons behind that offensive line shows what a special talent he is. Of course, we've all seen the Houdini type escape artistry from him. Absolute nightmare to keep contained in the pocket. Does a great job. I think he's improved in escaping the pocket and finding the pass, much like Aaron Rodgers has become prone to do. You don't see Rodgers take off too much, Wilson less so than he used to, although part of that may have been preserving his health and personal well-being last season. It wasn't pretty to watch a lot of the time last year. I think he was probably the first time in his career we saw him getting sort of truly rattled, whether that's because he was playing hurt and was playing out a little bit more scared. You just saw some bad decisions. I think that happens when you're under constant pressure. I think Andrew Luck, who I mentioned earlier, he's been suffering from some of those same things. But this team made the playoffs. Now, whilst that defence is great, you still got to put up points to win games, and this guy's the reason they were able to put up points on offence. No run game, one of the worst offensive lines I've seen in the last few years. Did a great job leading that team. Still does such a good job in the 2-minute drill. It's hard to feel like you've got this team beaten. He's got a bit of that Brady type effect where a lead, unless it's a massive one, does not feel safe. Absolutely exceptional season considering what was around him. Last season was the first time he truly convinced me that he was one of the absolute top guys in the league at this position. So moving on to player number 33 in the players list, we've got DeMarco Murray. He came in at 69 on my list. I think this is a bit high for him. I think whilst he was exceptional, I think one of the great strengths, again, he's quite a versatile guy. I don't think he's quite the game breaker that's, say for example, LeSean McCoy is probably is the closest running back I've got in the range. I think LeSean McCoy is a more dangerous player. I think when you play against a team with LeSean McCoy, you have to game plan for him. That's players that I'm looking for at this point. Guys that you're absolutely terrified of. When you play the Titans, I don't think you're necessarily too worried about who's running the ball. You worry about their scheme and how effective they are at running. Now, Murray is a very well-rounded player. I think he's a very good runner. I think he's a very good receiver. He's a good pass blocker. That's why he got onto my list and came in at a very good spot. But I do feel this is a bit high for him. We saw in Philly, need to have him in a certain type of scheme. Tennessee happens to be the perfect scheme for him. A guy like LeSean McCoy, I think you can have him anywhere. He's going to be productive. That's not to, don't mean to disrespect Marco Murray. I think he's a very good runner. He runs with power. He's got good bursts. He's prototypical one cut and hit that hole and hit it hard type of back. You will not see him putting too many moves on people. Tends to be just lowering the shoulder and going, and that's fine. But for me, a little bit high. Definitely deserved to be on the list this year. Absolutely. Had a great season. It was good to see him back to the kind of form that we saw those last couple of years with Dallas before, absolutely flaming out in Philly. So heading to 33 on my list, possibly the best left tackle I've seen. It's between him and John Ogden. Joe Thomas of the Cleveland Browns. Hard to judge him so much for last season because this probably was the worst Browns team he has been on. Still an exceptional pass blocker. I think he's got better at run blocking as he's been in the league. But really, it's that pass protection. I mean, he's absolutely phenomenal at it. Best technician at the position in the league right now, even as he's starting to advance in age. Very, very little decline, if any. It's just, now he's got a great line with him. It'll be very interesting to see what he can do. I can't remember what player it was. There was a sack shown on the list. A guy getting a sack on Joe Thomas, and you couldn't fault him. He held the guy in place for 4 or 5 seconds. Did a perfectly good job. Lack of awareness from the quarterback and not getting rid of the ball was what led to that sack. So this is why I've never ever been a big fan of numbers. This is an exceptional player. No doubt going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer in spite of the lack of team success. He can't be blamed for the Browns being as bad as they've been. What a player. I don't think he's been revealed yet on the players list. So, they tend not to treat O-linemen with enough love. So it'll be good to see when he is revealed. Heading to number 32 on the players list, Marcus Peters. Now, I've got him higher on my list, and part of that is I just love the improvement I saw in him last season. Of course, he had an exceptional rookie season, possibly as good a rookie season as I've seen from a corner. Was absolutely a menace. Throwing in his direction was a real risk. I think last year he managed to improve his overall game, despite the fact Keenan Allen was giving him an absolute shoeing in week 1. We'll forget that happened. If you ignore that, he was exceptional the rest of the year. I think something clicked, possibly in that game where he was just being beaten with double moves. I think he's learned that, especially with the tape teams have on him, they know he's got a tendency to gamble. I think he reined it back a little bit, gave up, some more easy completions as a result, but also wasn't burned nearly as often. Still manages to get his hand on a lot of balls. It's just, the term ball hawk is overused. This guy is a great example of one. Plays hard, good against the run. I think he's got the athleticism to just run with just about anyone. I think if you just play him slightly off, I don't think he's got quite there with his press game yet. But I think his ability to just mirror is the closest to Darrelle Revis that we've got in the league at this point in time. And prime Darrelle Revis, not current Darrelle Revis, unfortunately. And what a player. Comes in a bit higher on my list, and I'll discuss him a bit further there. But good to see him getting so much respect. He's truly an elite young player. Only 2 years in the league. Sticking with the corner theme though, on my list we've got Patrick Peterson coming in at number 32. Peterson is just a freakish athlete. He really is one of the few guys that you can just line up with anybody and feel pretty confident he's going to do a very good job. A lot of the stuff that I said about Peters kind of applies here, where I think Peterson's the most gifted corner in the league. I think he can do absolutely everything. I remember that draft he came out. He was the top player on my board that season. That was back when I was doing the blogs. You can go check that out. And that'll prove that was my position. Him and AJ Green were the two I had as the best two. But anyway, enough of that diversion into the past. The most gifted in terms of speed, agility, athleticism, great leaping ability, great ball skills. Has made some ridiculous catches over the last few years. I just think he gambles a little bit too much. But you have to give him credit. He does not get much help. It's much like Revis was in New York. They just try and use him to erase a guy. I think he's the only guy that's really being used in that role in the NFL week in and week out, regardless of the matchup at the moment, and he tends to do a pretty good job. He's an absolutely exceptional player. Who knows where the Cardinals secondary would have been without him last year? He really was. Him and Tony Jefferson were exceptional. Tyrann Mathieu, hopefully he gets back from his injury. Yeah, Patrick Peterson, absolute monster. I'd like to see him use him a bit more on offense because, why not? He's probably the most talented receiver they've got outside of Larry Fitzgerald at this point in time. So I suggest them that they go for it. Coming in at number 30 on the players list is Matthew Stafford. I was surprised to see him this high. I really thought this was one where me and the players would have him in about the same range. Where did I have him? I'm sure I had him at around 50 or so. Oh, I had him at 61. For me, Stafford fell away towards the end of last season, and I do think I think it was his best season as a pro. It absolutely was. This team had no run game, a pretty mediocre defence. He did an exceptional job, particularly in the fourth quarter of games. Those absurd statistics about them being behind in the fourth in the first 9 games of the season or something. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's a little high for me. I still think the offense there was pretty talented in spite of the lack of a run game. And although I do think his receivers really kind of started to let him down after a pretty good start to the year. Thought he had an exceptional season. As I say, a little bit high for me. I feel he could have possibly elevated the team a little more. But it was real progress. I think his decision making was without doubt the best it's been since he entered the league. With more consistently accurate. The main one was the decision making, because that's always been my issue with him. The Jay Cutler-esque tendency of just being like, why not? Let's see what happens. But really reined it in last year. Had he not done so, I don't think this team would have been nearly as successful as they were. So, yeah, I think the players definitely recognise that, and to me, this shows that they value that clutch factor, which he did demonstrate in spades last year. So, bit high for me, but a reasonable one. This week's not been quite as annoying, although Tyreek Hill, that was... I don't mean... again, love him as a player, but man, what a ridiculous ranking. Myself, player number 31, I had Alex Mack, the centre for the Falcons. He had an exceptional season. I really think he was one of the key factors in that offense being as effective as it was. Just solidified that group, bringing in veteran experience. He'd been exceptional with the Browns, and they get a bit of talent around him. Turns out, man, he can lead an offensive line very well. It's a pretty good time in the league right now for centres. There are some really good ones. This guy is one of the absolute best. No holes in his game, to be honest. He's a technician. He's great in the run game. He's great in the passing game. He can single block guys. Very good. Him in the guard, just getting rid of one guy. He can make it to the second level, which a lot of centres seem to struggle with. I think you can use him in the screen game. He's got that kind of mobility to him. Just all-round exceptional player. And you can see that veteran savvy last season. That Falcons O-line, which I thought would be a weakness going in, became a real strength for them. And I think that can primarily be attributed to what was one of the best free agent signings of last season and possibly in recent memory, if he can keep up that level of play, which I think he will. I've got very little doubt. But yeah, an absolutely exceptional player. So he comes in at 31. I don't think he's been revealed on the players list yet, so hopefully he'll get some love. So there you have it. That's those are the players. With regards to the players, we're at the point now where we're sort of seeing names, and we'll continue to see some of the egregious quarterback and wide receiver rankings. I've not really looked at it to see who's not been revealed, but a lot of the big names that I've got have already been revealed, that are coming up in the next few episodes, and some of them were pretty low. So there's going to be some stuff I heavily disagree with. So I think these ones will be a little more... next ones will be a bit more combative. Absolutely Tyreek Hill. I can't see anything topping that as the worst decision on the list thus far. but not a bad job by the players this week. Not bad. Last week was worse for sure. So there you have it. Let me know, what do you guys think? Do you agree, disagree with any of my assessments here? Feel free to shoot over your own lists. I'd be more than happy to discuss those with you and compare yours with the players I've revealed so far. I'm not going to give away too much, even though I have given away that a lot of players are still to be revealed. But I think most people could figure out a lot of those players anyway. You've got the Facebook comments below. Find us Facebook Cover Zero. I'm going to start being a lot more active on that, particularly in July. We've got some interesting plans coming up for that particular month. Find me on Twitter at Simon Conboy again. Come July, going to be a lot more active on the social media, trying to really engage with you guys as the season starts to approach. And yeah, like, share, subscribe. Check out the Patreon if you've enjoyed it. Check out some more of the shows. Got done every episode of Top 100 so far. A whole bunch of other stuff. Cover Who, where I talk about old players. Top 10 lists for players at positions coming out each Friday with my weekly reviews. Some other pieces that a bit more unique. Check them out. Let me know how you feel. Thank you very much for watching. Though, as always, I really do appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great evening and go Bucks.